The reason we are here, the transformational Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute. Several months ago, Mercy's leadership got together with one of our most generous champions, Mr. Paul Speranza. And together they saw a void, a genuine social societal need in which Mercy is uniquely qualified to address. More than ever, we see women succeeding across all areas of life. But as a society, we still see women underrepresented in leadership areas such as business, public service, and government, areas where women can shape the world in which we live. This gap, this underrepresentation, is equally significant for women from financially disadvantaged families and diverse backgrounds. And that can only mean one thing, that countless young women, hardworking, talented, and committed young women are not getting an opportunity to help shape the future of the society that will need them. So today, Our Lady of Mercy School for Young Women is announcing the launch of the $1.2 million world-class Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute for all Mercy students enrolled grades 9 through 12. This exciting announcement is not only for those grades 9 through 12 that are here, but for those future girls that'll be in the high school as well, which is super exciting. The Institute will help young women get the experience, opportunities, and inspiration they need to earn leadership roles in the world. In addition, the Institute will provide scholarship opportunities for women of diverse backgrounds. Paul and Cheryl Speranza co-created and co-funded the Institute through a generous gift of more than $1.2 million from their family and the Cheryl and Paul Speranza Family Foundation. Sadly, after they began to pursue this vision with Cheryl and Paul, Cheryl passed away earlier this year of pancreatic cancer. Cheryl had a passion for serving others, including Rochester's young women and youth, and exemplified the best of Mercy and our values. And now this institute will carry her name and her vision shared with Paul. The Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute will benefit the entire Mercy student body and provide funding for more than 11 emerging leaders from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. All student scholars of this institute will have access to extraordinary tools, experiences, and resources to forge success in school and beyond, including access to mentors, tutors, and youth advocates. The vision is tremendous, and the opportunity is unlimited with this. We all need to remember, leadership takes confidence, it takes conviction in one's beliefs, and a host of additional attributes that will be delivered via cutting-edge content only found here at the Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute. The Institute will help ensure that we uncover the potential that lies in all young women currently at Mercy and those who will join us. The Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute will create a powerful new girls network. The network will provide life and career assistance to scholars throughout their lifetime, not only here at Mercy, but in college, if they're seeking advanced degrees, in the working world, creating a lifelong network that will be revered by many. And unlike what many of us know of, the good old boys network, this network will be different because it will include not only women, but men as well. One of our goals today is to begin our search and extend an invitation for a prospective program leader, youth advocates, mentors, volunteers, and of course, students. The need is clear, and the time to start is now. Because of the Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute, women from all walks of life have a new edge in joining our society's leadership ranks and help build a future with truly everyone in mind. We anticipate the launch of the Institute in fall of 2019, and you'll be sure to hear more information as we continue to develop the program, the content, and the deliverables that will impact all of you. And now, I have the distinct pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Bernice King, daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. Dr. King is the Chief Executive Officer of the King Center, which was founded by her mother in 1968. Today, she continues to expand and enhance the King Center's education and training initiatives. A minister, a lawyer, an activist, Dr. King has been featured on numerous television shows and in magazines, served as a television commentator, and is the recipient of a host of awards and accolades. In March of this year, Dr. King was in Italy during Women's History Month, where she received an award for her work in advancing nonviolence. While there, she had a private meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican in Rome. A noted author, she has to her credit Hard Questions, Heart Answers, a compelling and inspiring book. She is an innovative, energetic, and committed leader dedicated to fulfilling the calling of taking her parents' legacy and the King Center into a new era. And she is with us today to demonstrate how the Cheryl Speranza Leadership Institute aligns with her father's vision. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Bernice King.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Heather, for that introduction to Paul Speranza. Good morning. To Sister Pat Prinzing, to Martin Kilbridge, in her absence, Mayor Lovely Warren, and here with us today, my friend, Deputy Mayor Dr. Cedric Alexander. To all of the elected officials, to all of the administrators, staff, board, friends, of Our Lady of Mercies, and to you, the community here in Rochester. I am delighted to be here at the request of Paul, and I am really here for 3 reasons. One, I'm here because people believed in me throughout my life. They poured into me, and they cultivated me to believe in myself and have the confidence to stand before audiences all over the world. In fact, my first public speaking engagement was at the age of 17 to the United Nations. I'm here also because Paul beckoned me. He tracked me down, and he gave me a commission. But I'm finally here because I believe in the next generation, and I am committed to paying it forward. Everything that I do in my life is for the next generation. Because I remember the words of my father in the I Have a Dream speech, when he spoke about me and my 3 siblings, that one day we would live in a nation where we would not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. While he specifically spoke about each of us, my father's work was about the next generation, ensuring that there would be a more just, humane, and peaceful world for those who would come after him. There are three types of people in the world. There are the few who get involved and they make things happen. There are the many who sit on the sideline and watch things happen. But then there are the overwhelming majority who frankly don't know what happened. My charge today is to ensure that each and every one of you who are seated in this place today or even standing are not the many who sit on the sideline and watch and critique what's happening, nor be amongst those who don't know what in the world is happening because you're consumed in your own worldly pursuits, but that you become among the few who hopefully one day will be the majority who get involved and make things happen. Frankly, as has already been stated by Heather in so many words, our world desperately needs more women in leadership. And if I were to say it another way, I would say that our world needs a facelift. Because the faces that oftentimes represent the industries and every arena in American life happens to be men, predominantly white males. And we have to change that, because it is strange and peculiar that the majority population happens to come from women. Women represent the majority of the workforce. Women represent the majority of those in our educational institutions. And yet, we only represent 20% of the U.S. Senate, hold less than 17% of Fortune 500 corporation board membership, less than 5% of CEOs. We do 60% of the work in terms of work product, 50% of food production, yet only make 10% of the income and own 1% of the property. That has to change and adjust. Not just because it's right to do it, but because we as women bring very important and valuable gifts, talents, and contributions and ways to operating in this world. There's a poll that was done, a Harris poll that was done, that showed that the majority of Americans view women as collaborative leaders because women consult, ask questions, build community, facilitate, and listen in most instances. In fact, the vast majority of our population, 3/4, crave this style of leadership. And so if we are going to have more collaborative leadership, and obviously women being collaborative, then we have work to do. And what is taking place and starting here at Mercy is a revolution. You know, I've spoken to audiences, and we've looked at the word revolt and revolution, and my father said that a movement that only moves people is a revolt. But a movement that changes people and systems and institutions is a revolution. What will take place here and hopefully spread throughout this nation will indeed be a revolution, because we will see changes in people, in perspectives, and we will see changes in our institutional structures. And so you ought to be proud to be in the number today as this endeavor is underway. I want to tell you a story because I think it's important in my commission today of activating you about a girl who became a very powerful woman. She was born in a rural setting, a place called Heiberger, Alabama. Anybody know where Heiberger is? You probably won't find it. If you were to drive through Heiberger, close your eyes quickly and open them back, you would have been through Heiberger. She grew up with parents who only had 8th grade and a 4th grade education. Her father finished 8th grade. Her mother finished 4th grade. But her mother had this attitude that if I only have to wear one dress, my children are going to get a good education. This was during the time of segregation in the South. And this little girl, who was always dreaming about and thinking about a life beyond Heiberger, Alabama, and asking God, why am I here on this earth and what is my purpose? Found her way to a school that happened to be about 9 to 11 miles away from her rural home in Marion, Alabama. She attended a school called the Lincoln Normal School, set up by missionaries. That young woman and her sister and brother attended that institution. Her sister graduated valedictorian. She graduated valedictorian, although her parents only had an 8th grade and a 4th grade education, which indicators would suggest, if you fast forward to today, that the chances of that individual being able to go on to college and maybe even graduate school would be very low. But something happened to Coretta Scott King, my mother, at the Lincoln Normal School. For you see, missionaries from the Quakers found their way down to that school. And they began to take interest in those young people at that school. All black children. Fran Thomas, and Cecil Thomas in particular, intersected with the life of Edith Scott Bagley, my mother's sister, and Coretta Scott King. And they began to work with these young ladies, with the rest of the students at that school. And they decided that they wanted to take them out of the environment to see another part of the world. And so, through the chorus that they had at the school, they traveled into the Midwestern states and found their way to a school called Antioch College in Ohio, Yellow Springs, Ohio, to be exact. Edith was in the chorus. And Edith Scott Bagley, my mother's sister, as a result of being exposed to that environment and a result of Cecil and Fran Thomas cultivating her as a person and the things that were already latent in her, decided to attend the Antioch College. And at that particular time, when she attended, she was the only African American in the school and in her class. And because of her experience at the school, and because of what the Thomases and other people at the Lincoln School did to encourage, to develop these young women, Edith's experience influenced my mother to attend Antioch College as well. And by the time my mother got to Antioch College, although she had come from a mother who only had a 4th grade education, a father who was an 8th grade education but was extremely industrious because he had his own trucking company where he hauled lumber and at one point built I'm losing the name of it. He built a, God, what is the name of this? What did you say? No, not the convenience store. He built his own company for those to haul lumber, and I'm just losing the thought right now. It's not a senior moment, it's an information moment. I'm on information overload. He built it, but 2 weeks later it was burned down. But that didn't stop my grandfather because he was determined. He was industrious. And every day of his life, he was, as an adult, he was threatened by white men, pulled over on the side of the road with a gun pointing in his face. But he always looked them in the eyes. And my grandfather ultimately lived to be 99 years of age. He overcame a lot of odds. He then opened his own convenience store, built his own home. And the convenience, it's like today a convenience store with a gas station in that rural town. But he only had an 8th grade education. But he believed in his children. My grandmother believed in her children. People saw something inside of them. And so by the time they get to Antioch College, Coretta Scott King, the woman who had to live against incredible odds as a kid and a teenager, walking to school while white children ride school buses that would splash mud on them as they walked to school, began to come into her own. She became an activist and involved in the peace movement while she was at Antioch College. She began to take positions and stances against things that she saw that were wrong at Antioch College. She wanted to do her student teaching in the Yellow Springs schools that was still segregated, and they would not let her, but she protested and she presented her petition ultimately to the president, and even though it was turned down, she still was determined that something has to change about these conditions, because people who came into her life when she was at that Lincoln Normal School as a 7th grader, 8th grader, 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader, gave her confidence and strength and courage to supplement the courage, confidence that her parents gave her. And so my mom left Antioch after being there for 6 years. You might ask, why was she there 6 years? I believe she was there 6 years because her life had to be slowed down. My father's life had to be sped up so that their lives could intersect. Because my father finished college at the age of 15. My mother is 2 years older than my father. So he finished college at 15. Started college at 15, finished college at 19, and then went to theology school for 3 years before he got to Boston to work on his PhD. So with all of that time, if Martin Luther King Jr. had gone to college at 18, he would have missed Coretta Scott King. And if Coretta Scott King had been at Antioch for the 4 years that usually is the time that we spend in college, Martin King and Coretta Scott King never would have intersected, and I wouldn't be here today. But it's important for you to understand that, because sometimes things will happen in our lives as we are being developed, as we're moving toward our goals, young people, that may seem like an interruption or a delay, but it's not. It's you're really on time. And so you can't get discouraged and you can't get disgusted. What you have to do is to just remain focused, because once you have been surrounded and you're being guided and you're being cultivated and poured into, trust me, none of that is for naught. All of that, as the Bible would say, all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and are the called according to his purpose. So there's nothing in our lives that happens by chance or by accident. It's all according to purpose, his purpose. And I'm going somewhere with this, and I'm through. So Coretta Scott King leaves Antioch 6 years after she begins, and she travels up to Boston with no money to attend New England Conservatory of Music. Her dream was always to be a concert singer. And she went there not knowing if she would be able to start school, but she had faith and belief because so many people had already believed in her. So many people had already come alongside of her. And in fact, once she got there, she went to see another person by the name of Bertha Wormley. Bertha Wormley gave my mother an envelope. And on our way back on the train, my mother looked in the envelope, and it was enough money to help her with her room and board. And she also received a letter indicating that she had financial support to help her attend the New England Conservatory of Music. And it's there that she met Martin Luther King Jr. Coretta Scott King had already read about, heard about Mahatma Gandhi when she was at the Lincoln Normal School. Coretta Scott King, as I told you, was already a part of the peace movement. And she also, at that time in her life at Antioch, was a part of the progressive political party that existed at the time. So when she met Martin Luther King Jr., she was already in her own right an activist because people had cultivated her, had believed in her, had urged her, and surrounded her. And so they met, and ultimately they married. And there's a whole lot that I can say that can take all day. But this is what I'm going to say. Coretta Scott King is the reason why people celebrate, commemorate, remember, look to the leadership, the lessons, and the teachings of Dr. King today. Many people give credit to my father for things that he did, and rightfully so. But just as Paul is spending time nurturing, developing, and carrying forward Cheryl's legacy, without an individual to carry your legacy forward, you will die, and what's in you will die, and we will move on to other people. Coretta Scott King made sure that people understood and knew about Dr. King and his teachings. And she did that not because she just believed in him, but because the teachings were consistent with the things that she believed in. The things that had been earlier cultivated in her before she even met Martin Luther King Jr. She spent a lot of time in that movement doing freedom concerts to help raise money for the civil rights movement. Many times, my father could not go to certain places, and he would send her in his stead. And sometimes it was a little bit uneasy for her to do that because she wasn't a public speaker, but because he believed in her, because there were already seeds of greatness that had shown themselves in her, he encouraged her and pushed her. Sometimes in this life, when people have certain gifts and talents and abilities inside of them, you got to be encouraged and pushed, because some leaders are reluctant, and I'm one of them. You have to be pushed. You have to be encouraged. And that happened with my mother over and over again. And when you look at this legacy today, it was the leader, Coretta Scott King, who came from parents, economically challenged parents, that helped to shape and fashion the King legacy. She's the architect. Because when my father was assassinated, he was one of the most hated men in America. He was most hated because by 1967, he made a stance against the war in Vietnam. And he said that he could no longer segregate his conscience and watch as this war was going on, killing innocent lives, and also taking money away from what could have been used for the war on poverty that Lyndon Johnson started but never invested in. And so he was challenged by other civil rights leaders for taking that bold stance. And guess what? It was Coretta Scott King in the background encouraging him, because she was already participating in many of the peace movement activities she was going to nuclear disarmament conferences. She was heavily involved in the peace movement and saying, Martin, we need your voice in this movement. And although all of his colleagues in civil rights, for the most part, turned against him, challenged him in the media, because they felt like his stance would threaten the support of President Johnson for the civil rights movement. He had been so helpful and friendly towards civil rights with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and they felt that this would threaten that support, continued support. And it did. But Coretta Scott King had the courage to push Martin Luther King Jr. because people pushed her. And so he spoke out, and at that particular time in the civil rights movement, young black people were becoming frustrated and angry about the pace at which change was taking place. And so they were questioning the power of nonviolence, in fact, turning away from it. And so, contrary to what he is today, my father was one of the most hated men in 1968. But today, he's one of the most loved men in the world. And that's because of a leader by the name of Coretta Scott King, who was once a little young girl who had dreams and ambitions of changing the world. And because there were those who saw the potential in her, believed in her, spent time with her, nurtured her, cultivated her, and eventually Fran and Cecil Thomas became one of her best friends. She was able to stand as one of our great leaders. She led the institution that I'm now over, the King Center. She founded it in 1968, 2.5 months after my father was assassinated. She refused to be just a widow. She refused to be consumed in her grief. She decided to divert her attention to continuing the work that they were doing together, leading that movement of freedom, justice, and equality. So she institutionalized his legacy to teach people about his nonviolent philosophy and methodology. She worked on institutionalizing his legacy in our culture by getting involved later on heavily in lobbying for the King holiday. And so I said all this just to say one thing. They made a sacrifice in the 50s and 60s for our society to be where it is today, even in light of all that's going on. We are in a much better place than we were in the 1950s and 60s, trust me. And they had to sacrifice life, homes, some education, jobs for us. They paid it forward. And now is your opportunity to sacrifice. But all you have to do is sacrifice time. According to Paul, don't need your money, but we need your time. We need your talent, your ideas to help to cultivate and develop these young ladies so that we can change the face of America, change the tone and tenor of America, so that we can have more collaborative, compassionate, creative, and conscientious leaders. That's what our world needs today. It's time out for hierarchical and authoritarian leadership. It's time out for top-down leadership. The greatest movement, I believe, of all times in this nation was the one that my father led. And although men were at the helm in terms of the face of it, make no mistake, although women didn't hold the positions of leadership, they were operating in leadership. Without the women, there would not have been a movement, because women were the ones who suggested that there be a boycott in 1955 after Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on that bus. Women were the ones who passed out leaflets, flyers. Women were the ones who provided meals. Women were a part of those who helped with the strategy and the planning of the carpools so that people could get from point A to point B. But now, instead of just women operating in the shadows, it's time for women to emerge. And we just experienced a very historic moment in America when 100 women were elected to Congress. But folks, that is just tapping the surface. That's only a fourth of Congress, or a little bit less when you add the Senate. And women are more than 50% of the population. And so we have to be intentional to change it. That's why this institute is important, because nothing will change in this world without the intention of people and without the contribution of time and talent of individuals, a few little hours here and there during the week on a consistent basis. Because believe me, it doesn't take a whole lot for a young person who has everything against them statistically to still emerge as a leader. All they need is someone to show up in their lives, to be present, to fill in the gaps and the voids, to help in those areas of weakness and deficiency. And they can become all that God created them to be, because nobody has been born into this earth by accident. Everybody is the answer to a question and the solution to a problem. And so thank you, Paul. And in your absence, thank you, Cheryl, for daring to step outside of the norm and being intentional about making a change in this world that is desperately needed. These are definitely revolutionary times. And I'm inviting each and every one of you to join the revolution. God bless you.